Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to start talking about Chapter 11 on supply chain management. So you should be able to look at this recording and know everything there is to know about supply chains. Okay, so let me just pull up here and get the slideshow started. All right, so the first question is, what is supply chain management? The definition is again to coordinate all the activities within the supply chain to maximize your competitive advantage. So, in other words, you have to coordinate everything as it goes from the raw materials to the production and as it gets to the final customer through the transportation, warehousing, distribution, and so on. All right, so the strategic importance is to coordinate really everything raw materials, satisfy the customer, how are you going through it? And so you include your supplier, your manufacturer, your service providers, and other people. All right. So it is important because a large portion of your sales dollars are spent on purchases. And all these supplier relationships are also important because companies work with their suppliers to innovate, to reduce the speed of the design time and to reduce other kind of costs. So increasingly, supply chain relationships are becoming more and more important. So if you look at the cost, this is from your book, Table 1.1. The costs are pretty huge. So if you look very closely here, the highest cost is in petroleum and followed by automobiles. So let's look at the supply chain for beer. So if you look at this one, this is on page 441, figure 11.1. So let's look at the supply chain for beer. Beer is made from hops, and the hops, in order to get hops, you have to go to the farm, right? So the farmer grows grain or plants grains, and he gives you hops for about 34 cents a bushel. Now, on the other side, you also need to have a supply chain for your cans or for your bottles so that when the hops come together, you have cans or bottles to package this beer in. So this all gets to the brewery. This is Budweiser, and they are busy making beer, and this beer is then put into cans and bottles and then sent all over to the distributor. So the distributor gets it at $3.36 for a six-pack. The distributor then sells it to Sam's Grocery for $4.62, and when you go to Stop and Shop or Jewel Osco, you get beer for about $6.99 for a six-pack. So this is the supply chain for beer, and as you can see, you've got the raw materials, you've got the cans, you've got the distributor and the grocer involved in your supply chain. So the first question we have to consider is, do you make your own product or do you buy it? If you make it, then you have to choose between obtaining products externally rather than making everything internally. Even if you make most of your product, you still need raw materials. And the second strategy is to outsource. So in outsourcing, anything that doesn't add core value, you would outsource it to save costs. So an example would be a lot of companies outsource their IT or service, but the main thing is to keep your core competency in-house and to outsource the rest. So within sourcing, there are six main strategies, and we look at that from many suppliers to few, vertical integration, joint venture, Keiretsu, and a virtual company. So the first strategy is to have many suppliers. This is an example when you have a commodity product like bread. If you're a baker, you need bread. So all you would do is you would have an RFQ, which stands for request for a quotation from all your suppliers. And based on the cheapest price, that's the person who would get your bid. So suppliers compete with one another and mainly based on price. The second strategy is having few suppliers. So this is an example of automotive companies where they really work with a select group of suppliers and they create values through economies of scale. And in this case, the suppliers are very willing to maybe work with the company toward their JIT or inventory programs. The only drawback is that the cost of changing supplies is very, very huge. And we have an example of US Schwinn. They had fewer suppliers, and one of them was the Taiwan Manufacturing Company. After a few years, US Schwinn became bankrupt, and Taiwan went ahead and gobbled up all their business. All right, so cost of changing suppliers can be high. Trade secrets and other alliances can also be challenging, but a lot of the large manufacturing companies work with few suppliers. The third strategy is vertical integration. So, this is where you integrate vertically through the supply chain. So, there are two strategies here: the backward strategy, where you work with your raw material providers. So, just like the baking example, you're working with the person from the farm to get your flour. Another example is, let's say you make paper, and for paper you need pulp and you need trees, so you work backwards in order to integrate with your raw material source. The other strategies where you work is the forward integration. So, an example of that is with Apple, they don't have other retail stores. You can buy Apple products at their retail stores. So, they go ahead and buy their own retail stores. Another example of this would be Tesla. So, Tesla, again, just like Apple, in Tesla, they don't work with dealers. You have to go to a Tesla, shop or order directly from Tesla. So this is an example of a vertical integration. So vertical integration is a pretty good strategy. And the integration could be forward or backwards, and it can improve your cost and quality. The only caveat is vertical integration is very, very risky in companies with a high tech change. The next strategy is joint ventures, where you could look at a formal collaboration to enhance your skills, secure a supply, or reduce your costs. The main thing here is you both have to be pretty strong, equal level of companies, so that you can cooperate without diluting your brand. The next strategy from Japan is the Keiretsu network. It's a middle ground. So a company becomes a part of the larger group of companies. So the Toyota group is a Keiretsu network. So if you're a supplier for Toyota, you become a part of that network. All right. So the advantage for the smaller company is that you get financial support. And for the company, the advantage is that you expect long-term relationships, and it can extend through many, many levels of the supply chain network. The last strategy is a virtual company. In a virtual company, you're relying on a variety of supplier relationships. It's very, very fluid. It's very cost effective because you don't really need a brick and mortar presence. So examples of this would be, eBay or Craigslist, or any company where they don't really have a physical presence. You're just connecting buyers and suppliers together, right? The second part is on risk. So we'll take a break and come back to this in the second part of the video. So I'm going to stop right here.